The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the steel doors locking them inside. Roman Mercer, the man who controlled the city's port authority and half its underground gambling, stared at the antique titanium vault on his desk. Beside him, a world-renowned cryptographer was sweating through his Italian suit, his hands shaking as he typed the final code. A buzzer sounded, harsh and final. Another failure. That was the 20th attempt. Roman didn't yell. He simply uncorked a bottle of bourbon and signaled to his guards. "Get him out of here before I lose my temper." Nobody noticed the waitress in the corner, holding a dirty rag, who had solved the puzzle in her head 10 minutes ago. The atmosphere inside the VIP suite of the Obsidian Lounge was toxic. It smelled of stale cigar smoke, top-shelf scotch, and the distinct metallic scent of fear. This wasn't just a backroom poker game gone wrong. This was a tribunal of failure. Roman Mercer stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the rain-slicked streets of Chicago. He was a man composed of sharp angles and expensive tailoring, his presence alone enough to suck the oxygen out of a room. At 32, he had inherited an empire that was crumbling from the inside, all because of a single, mechanical deadlock left by his late father. On the heavy oak desk in the center of the room sat the Gordian sphere. It wasn't a digital safe. It wasn't something that could be hacked with a laptop or drilled with a laser. It was a chaotic masterpiece of engineering, a sphere of interlocking titanium plates, gears, and fluid-filled gyroscopes commissioned by his father from an eccentric Swiss watchmaker who had died shortly after its completion. Inside was the ledger containing the access codes to the Mercer family's offshore accounts. Billions of dollars currently frozen in regulatory limbo. Without that ledger, Roman's empire would be bankrupt by the end of the month. "Mr. Mercer, please," stammered Dr. Aris Thorne. No, not Thorne. That name was forbidden. This was Dr. Aris Galloway, a tenured professor of mechanical engineering who had been flown in on a private jet 3 hours ago. "The fluid dynamics inside the sphere don't match standard physics. It shifts center of gravity every time I touch a dial. It's statistically impossible." Roman turned slowly. His eyes were the color of cold steel. "Statistically impossible? You are the third genius I've brought in tonight, Galloway. The previous one was a safe cracker who claimed to have opened vaults for the Federal Reserve. Do you know where he is now?" Galloway swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. No. He's in the elevator, praying I don't change my mind about letting him leave with his fingers intact," Roman said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You have 5 minutes left on your hour. Figure it out." In the periphery of this high-stakes drama, Louisa was invisible. She moved with the practiced silence of someone who had spent her life trying not to be noticed. Wearing the standard-issue black vest and skirt of the Obsidian Lounge staff, she was currently wiping down a side table where one of the previous experts had spilled a glass of water in his nervousness. Louisa was 26, though the shadows under her eyes made her look older. Her hands were red and chapped from the harsh detergents she used. To the men in the room, Roman, his hulking bodyguard Victor, and the terrified Professor Galloway, she was less than a person. She was furniture, a mechanism that replaced empty glasses and removed full ashtrays. She sprayed the surface of the mahogany table and wiped it in circular motions. Left, right, pause. Her eyes, however, weren't on her work. They were darting sideways, locked onto the sphere sitting on the desk 10 feet away. From where she stood, she could see the reflection of the device in the darkened window pane. She watched Professor Galloway's trembling fingers manipulate the outer rings. He was trying to force the gears into alignment based on a Fibonacci sequence. "He's wrong," Louisa thought, a sudden spike of frustration rising in her chest. "It's not mathematical, it's musical." She bit her lip, forcing herself to look away. It wasn't her business. She was a waitress earning minimum wage plus tips, and tonight the tips were non-existent because the lounge was closed for this private consultation. She needed this job. Her little brother Toby needed his insulin, and the rent on their studio apartment in the crumbling distinct of South Side was 2 weeks overdue. Speaking up would get her fired, or worse. 2 minutes, Victor grunted from the door. Victor was a man the size of a vending machine, with a scar running through his eyebrow and a deep-seated distrust of anyone who used words with more than 3 syllables. "I can't do it," Galloway snapped, backing away from the desk. "The tumblers are reactive. It's a trap mechanism. If I turn the 3rd ring past the meridian, it locks down for 24 hours. I can't risk it." Roman walked over to the desk. He looked down at the sphere, his expression unreadable. He picked up a heavy crystal decanter of whiskey and poured a glass. "You're giving up?" "I'm preserving the device," Galloway argued, wiping sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. "You need a computer model to simulate the interior. You can't solve this with human hands." "My father did," Roman said softly. "He opened it every Sunday night." "Your father was a madman," Galloway blurted out, then immediately clamped his hand over his mouth. The room went deathly silent. Even Louisa stopped wiping the table. Roman didn't strike him. He didn't scream. He just smiled, a cold, predatory curving of his lips. "Victor, escort the professor out and ensure he forgets the address of this building." "Mr. Mercer, wait! Go!" Victor grabbed the professor by the arm and dragged him toward the exit. The heavy mahogany door slammed shut, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. Now it was just Roman and Louisa in the vast, dim room. Roman sighed, the weight of the failed night crashing down on him. He loosened his tie and slumped into his leather chair, running a hand through his dark hair. He looked exhausted. For a moment, the mask of the ruthless Mafia Don slipped, revealing a man who was cornered and running out of options. Louisa knew she should leave. Her shift was technically over once the room was clean. She picked up her tray, clutching it to her chest like a shield. She began to back toward the service entrance. "Wait," Roman said. He didn't look up. Louisa froze. "Sir?" "Leave the bottle." He gestured to the scotch on the side table she had just cleaned. "Yes, sir." She hurried to the table, her heart hammering against her ribs. She placed the bottle on his desk, her movement swift and efficient. As she set it down, her eyes fell on the sphere again. Up close, it was breathtaking. The titanium was etched with microscopic grooves that looked like constellations. It was vibrating slightly, a low hum that most people wouldn't notice, but Louisa felt it in her teeth. It wasn't just a machine, it was a harmonic resonator. She stared at it for a second, too long. "Is there something you want?" Roman asked. His voice was sharp again. He was looking at her now, really looking at her, perhaps for the first time that night. He saw the fraying collar of her uniform, the loose strand of brown hair falling over her face, and the strange intensity in her hazel eyes. "No, sir, just—" "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's a coffin," Roman corrected bitterly. "A coffin for my legacy." He waved his hand dismissively. "Get out. Tell the manager to clear the floor. I don't want to be disturbed." Louisa turned to go. She made it to the door, her hand hovering over the brass handle. She thought of the rent. She thought of the 20 experts who had failed. She thought of the sheer arrogance of the men who had tried to force the machine rather than listen to it. But mostly, she thought about the puzzle. Her mind was an itch she couldn't scratch. She saw the pattern. It was screaming at her. The misalignment was painful to her brain, like a picture hanging crooked on a wall. She couldn't help it. "He was turning it the wrong way," she said. The words hung in the air, soft but audible. Roman stopped the glass halfway to his mouth. He slowly swiveled his chair around. "Excuse me?" Louisa turned back, her face pale but her chin high. The professor, and the man before him. They were treating it like a combination lock. Right, left, right. But the gears aren't connected by teeth. They're magnetic. You have to spin them against the resistance to build up charge, then release. Roman stared at her. For a long, agonizing moment. He said nothing. Then, a low, incredulous laugh escaped him. "A waitress," he muttered. "I have the head of engineering from MIT in here, and the waitress thinks she knows better." "I'm not just a waitress," Louisa said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm good with puzzles." "Puzzles," Roman repeated flatly. "This isn't a crossword in the Sunday paper, sweetheart. This is military-grade encryption." "It's a gyroscopic kinetic lock," Louisa corrected him automatically. "Based on the 18th century designs of Jean-Pierre Droz, but modernized with magnetic induction." Roman went still. The glass touched the table with a soft clink. He studied her, his eyes narrowing. He didn't ask how she knew that name. He didn't ask who she was. He simply gestured to the chair opposite him. "Come here. I should get back to work. Come. Here." It wasn't a request. Louisa walked forward, her legs feeling like lead. She stopped in front of the desk. The sphere sat between them, a silent, mocking metal beast. Roman leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. "You have 60 seconds, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Prove you aren't wasting my time, because if you touch that thing and trigger the lockdown, the price of that error will be more than you can make in 10 lifetimes." Louisa looked at the sphere. Then she looked at Roman. She saw the desperation hidden behind his threat. "I don't need 60 seconds, she said, reaching out her hand. The moment Louisa's fingertips touched the cold titanium of the sphere, the room seemed to vanish. The smell of whiskey and the oppressive gaze of Roman Mercer faded into the background. There was only the device. She didn't look at the numbers etched on the rings. Instead, she closed her eyes. "Listen," she told herself. She placed her left hand on the base of the sphere to stabilize it, and used her right hand to gently rotate the outermost ring. She didn't spin it hard. She moved it slowly, counterclockwise. She felt the magnetic resistance pushing back against her skin, a repulsive force that felt like trying to push two north magnets together. Push through it, she thought. Most people stopped when they felt resistance, assuming the lock was jammed. But Louisa understood friction. She understood that sometimes you had to increase the tension to find the release point. Roman watched her, fascinated despite himself. He had expected her to fumble, to guess, to spin the dials randomly like a child playing with a toy. But she was moving with the precision of a surgeon. Her eyes were closed, her head tilted slightly to the side, as if she were listening to a whisper. Louisa counted the vibrations in her fingertips. 1, 2, 3. There. A tiny, almost inaudible click echoed from deep within the sphere. 1, she whispered. She immediately reversed direction, spinning the second ring clockwise with a sharp snap. The fluid inside the gyroscope sloshed, changing the center of gravity. The sphere wobbled on its stand, but Louisa's left hand held it firm, grounding the energy. Roman sat up straighter. The experts had spent hours running algorithms and using stethoscopes. This girl, this waitress with the frayed uniform, was doing it by feel. Louisa's mind flashed back to her childhood. She wasn't just a girl from the South Side. Before the debts, before her father's accident, Before everything fell apart, she had been a student at the Harding Institute for Gifted Youth. She saw numbers as colors, mechanics as living things. She had been on a scholarship for mechanical engineering until her father got sick, and the medical bills ate everything: her college fund, their house, her future. She had dropped out to work double shifts, but she never stopped seeing the patterns. She felt the final tumbler align. It wasn't a mechanical latch, it was a magnetic seal breaking. She opened her eyes. They were bright, burning with an intensity that startled Roman. "It's done," she said softly. She removed her hands and took a step back. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Roman looked at the sphere, then at Louisa. His face began to darken with anger. "You played me," he growled, standing up. "It's exactly the same as car-chunk." The sound was heavy and satisfying. The top hemisphere of the globe split into 4 sections and bloomed open like a mechanical lotus flower. A hiss of pressurized air escaped. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, sat a small, leather-bound book and a silver USB drive. Roman froze. He looked at the open vault, his mouth slightly parted. He had watched the best minds in the country fail at this for 3 weeks. He had prepared himself for the reality that his inheritance was lost forever. And now, a girl who served drinks for a living had cracked it in 45 seconds. He looked up at her. The anger was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous: curiosity. "Who are you?" he asked. Louisa wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling very small again. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking. "I'm just Louisa. I work the evening shift." "Louisa," he tested the name, rolling it around his tongue. He reached into the sphere and pulled out the ledger. He flipped it open, verifying the contents. It was real. The codes were there. The empire was saved. He snapped the book shut and looked at her. "You're not just Louisa. And you're certainly not a waitress. Not anymore." I have to go," Louisa stammered. She realized she had just made herself a liability. She knew what was in the box now. People who knew too much about Roman Mercer usually disappeared. "Please, sir, I won't tell anyone. I just wanted to help." She turned and walked quickly toward the door. "Stop," Roman commanded. Louisa stopped, her hand on the doorknob. "Turn around." She did. Roman was walking around the desk, closing the distance between them. He stopped 2 feet away from her. He was tall, towering over her by a good 6 inches. Up close, he smelled of sandalwood and danger. "You think I'm going to let you walk out that door after what you just did?" he asked quietly. "I promise I won't say anything," Louisa pleaded, her voice rising in panic. "I just need this job. My brother—" "I don't care about your brother right now," Roman interrupted, though his tone wasn't cruel. It was calculating. "You solved a puzzle that defeated men with PhDs. You understood the mechanism intuitively. Where did you learn that?" "My father was a clockmaker," she lied. It was a half-truth. Her father was a mechanic, but he fixed engines, not clocks. "I used to help him." Roman studied her face, searching for the lie. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a money clip. It was thick with cash, $100 bills. He peeled off a stack that must have been $5,000 and held it out. Louisa stared at the money. That was 3 months of rent. That was Toby's insulin for half a year. "Take it," Roman said. She reached out with a trembling hand and took the cash. "Thank you, sir." "That's for tonight," Roman said. "But that's not the offer." Louisa looked up, confused. "The offer?" "I have a lot of problems, Louisa. Problems that require specific solutions. Problems that my brute security guards and my overeducated consultants can't seem to fix." He took a step closer, invading her personal space. I need someone who sees things differently. Someone who sees the patterns. I don't understand, she whispered. I'm offering you a job, Roman said. Not scrubbing tables. I want you on my personal staff. You'll be my analyst, my puzzle solver. I can't working for the mob, Louisa blurted out, then clamped her mouth shut, eyes wide. Roman's lips twitched into a smirk. The mob? We prefer logistics management, and the pay is $5,000 a week, plus benefits, including healthcare for your brother. Louisa's breath hitched. Healthcare, that changed everything. But, Roman added, his eyes hardening, there is a condition. You belong to me. You are on call 24/7, and you never, ever lie to me. If you try to run, if you try to sell what you know to my enemies, well, let's just say the severance package is terminal. The door behind Louisa opened. Victor, the massive bodyguard, stepped in, looking surprised to see Louisa still there and the sphere wide open on the desk. Boss? Victor grunted, eyeing the open vault with shock. Did the professor come back? No, Roman said, never taking his eyes off Louisa. Louisa opened it. Victor's jaw dropped. He looked at the petite girl in the cheap uniform with new suspicion. Her? She's a plant. She has to be. Nobody cracks a Mercer lock in a minute unless they have the blueprints. She's not a plant, Victor. She's a prodigy, Roman said. He extended his hand to Louisa. So, Louisa, do we have a deal? Or do you want to go back to wiping tables and watching your brother get sicker? It was a cruel manipulation, but an effective one. Louisa looked at his hand. It was a deal with the devil. She knew that. Roman Mercer was a dangerous man. But poverty was a slow death, and she was tired of dying slowly. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and placed her rough, calloused hand into his manicured one. I'll take the job. Roman's fingers closed around hers. His grip was warm and firm. Good choice. Victor, take her to the staff quarters. Get her out of those rags. And get her a secure phone. She starts immediately. As Victor ushered her out, Louisa glanced back. Roman was already back at his desk, reading the ledger, the golden light of the lamp illuminating his face. He didn't look up, but as the door closed, she saw a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. She had solved the box, but she had a terrible feeling she had just locked herself into a much more dangerous cage. The drive to the south side was silent, save for the hum of the armored SUV's engine. To Louisa, even that hum told a story. She could hear the fuel injection, the slight unevenness in the rear axle, the perfect synchronization of the pistons. She sat in the back seat, clutching the envelope of cash Roman had given her. It felt heavy, not just with paper, but with expectation. Victor glanced at her through the rearview mirror. You're quiet for someone who just won the lottery. I didn't win the lottery, Louisa murmured, looking out the tinted window as the clean streets of downtown gave way to the cracked pavement and flickering streetlights of her neighborhood. I sold my soul, Victor snorted. Better the devil who pays, kid. Trust me. As they pulled up to her crumbling apartment complex, a brick monstrosity with barred windows and peeling paint, Louisa's mind drifted back. She needed to understand how she got here to accept where she was going. It hadn't always been like this. 6 years ago. Louisa was 20. She sat in a sunlit workshop that smelled of cedar and oil. Her father, Arthur, was hunched over a 19th century grandfather clock. It stuck lids, Arthur sighed, wiping grease from his forehead. The mainspring is intact, the gears are aligned, but the pendulum won't hold the rhythm. I've been at it for 3 days. Louisa didn't touch the clock. She just leaned in. She closed her eyes. "Shh," she whispered. She blocked out the traffic outside. She blocked out the radio. She listened to the heartbeat of the machine. Tick, tock, tick, scritch, tock. "The escapement lever," she said, opening her eyes. "It's got a microscopic burr on the left pallet. It's creating drag every fourth swing. It's not mechanical failure, Dad. It's friction." Arthur looked at her, then put on his jeweler's loupe. He peered deep into the mechanism. A slow smile spread across his face. "I don't know how you do it, honey. You hear things others can't even see." "It's not hearing," Louisa had tried to explain. "It's feeling. Everything has a rhythm. When the rhythm is wrong, it hurts my head." She was supposed to go to MIT that fall. She was going to design engines for spacecraft. She was going to change the world. Then came the crash, a drunk driver on the I-90. Her father died instantly. Louisa survived with a broken arm. But Toby, who was only 12 then, was pinned in the back. The surgeries drained the insurance. The rehabilitation took the house. The ongoing complications, a rare autoimmune response triggered by the trauma, took everything else. Louisa dropped out. She stopped designing engines and started scrubbing floors. The gift that allowed her to hear the friction in a clock became a curse. She could hear the friction in her own life, the grinding poverty, the ticking clock of Toby's medical bills, and she couldn't fix it. Until tonight. The SUV stopped. "I'll wait here," Victor said, eyeing a group of rough-looking men on the corner who were staring at the luxury car. "5 minutes. Grab your brother. Grab your stuff. Don't make me come up there." Louisa ran up the 3 flights of stairs. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and mildew. She unlocked her door with shaking hands. The apartment was tiny, a single room divided by a curtain. Toby was asleep on the couch, his breathing raspy. He was 18 now, but he looked 14. Frail, pale, dependent on medication they rationed like gold dust. Louisa shook him gently. "Toby, wake up!" He groaned, opening sleepy eyes. "Lids? You're home early. Did you get the tips?" "Better," she whispered, fighting back tears. She pulled a duffel bag from under the bed and started throwing clothes into it. "We're leaving, Toby." "Right now." "Leaving? For where? Did the landlord kick us out?" Panic spiked in his voice. He tried to sit up, but coughed weakly. "No. I got a job. A real job." She paused, holding his favorite hoodie. She couldn't tell him the truth. She couldn't tell him she was working for Roman Mercer, the man whose name was whispered with fear in this very neighborhood. "I got hired by a security firm, as a consultant, high pay, live-in position. They have a private doctor for you." Toby stared at her, his eyes wide. "You're serious? You're not messing with me?" "Look." She showed him the stack of cash. Toby's jaw dropped. He reached out and touched the bills. "Louisa, it's our way out," she said fiercely. She zipped the bag. "Can you walk?" "I think so." She helped him up. He leaned heavily on her. As they walked out of that apartment for the last time, Louisa felt a strange sensation. The grinding noise in her head, the constant, low-level panic of survival, had stopped. But as she helped Toby into the back of Victor's armored car, a new sound replaced it. The deep, dangerous hum of a high-stakes engine. She had fixed her financial problem, but she had just stepped into a machine that was far more complex and deadly than anything she had ever encountered. She looked back at the tenement building as they drove away. The 1-minute miracle at the Obsidian Lounge hadn't just opened a safe. It had opened a trap door beneath her feet. The Mercer estate wasn't just a penthouse. It was a fortress in the sky. The private elevator opened directly into a foyer that was larger than Louisa's entire apartment. The floors were marble, the walls adorned with abstract art that probably cost more than the GDP of a small country. Victor led them down a long corridor. Guest wing is on the east side. Your brother will stay there. The nurse is already prepping his room. Nurse? Louisa asked, adjusting her grip on her duffel bag, which suddenly looked very dirty in this pristine environment. Mr. Mercer doesn't do things halfway, Victor grunted. He stopped at a heavy oak door. This is the boys' room, your next door. Louisa helped Toby settle in. The room was like a 5-star hotel suite. A hospital bed had been set up in the corner, discreetly monitoring his vitals. A woman in scrubs, middle-aged, kind-faced, was already checking the charts. Go, Toby said, seeing Victor waiting impatiently in the hall. He looked overwhelmed but comfortable for the first time in years. I'll be okay, Lids. Seriously. Louisa kissed his forehead and stepped out. Boss wants to see you, Victor said. Library. Now. Louisa followed him. She was still wearing her waitress uniform, smelling of stale bar mats and sweat. She felt like an intruder. They entered the library. It was a 2-story room lined with books, dominated by a massive fireplace. Roman was sitting in a wingback chair, reviewing documents. He had changed out of his suit into a charcoal sweater and dark slacks, looking deceptively casual. He didn't look up as she entered. There are clothes in your closet. Burn that uniform. You represent me now. Louisa stood awkwardly in the center of the room. Is my brother safe? Roman turned a page. He's safer than the president. The doctor will see him in the morning to adjust his treatment plan. I keep my word, Louisa. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said, finally looking up. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and utterly devoid of warmth. I paid for a service. Now I intend to use it. He stood up and walked to a large drafting table in the corner of the room. It was covered in blueprints and shipping manifests. Come here. Louisa approached. My organization moves product, Roman said. He didn't specify what the product was, and Louisa didn't ask. We use a complex network of shipping containers, trucking routes, and shell companies to move inventory from the port to distribution centers. For the last 3 months, we've been bleeding. Revenue is down 8%. My accountants say it's market fluctuation. My lieutenants say it's bad luck. He tapped a finger on the chaotic pile of papers. I think someone is stealing from me. Louisa looked at the papers. They were a mess of dates, weights, route numbers, and fuel costs. I'm not an accountant, she said. No, you're a mechanic, Roman replied. You see friction. This system, he gestured to the papers, is a machine. Somewhere there is a gear slipping. Find it. Louisa hesitated. This was it. The moment she became an accomplice. If she pointed out a discrepancy, someone would likely get hurt. If I find nothing? She asked. Then I lose millions and you lose your job, Roman said simply. And Toby goes back to the county clinic. The threat was subtle but effective. Louisa took a deep breath. She stepped up to the table. She didn't try to read the numbers as currency. She read them as flow, input, output, velocity. She scanned the shipping manifests for the Port of Chicago, container weights, fuel consumption logs for the trucks. Her eyes darted back and forth. The room was silent except for the crackling of the fire. Monday, truck 404. Weight, 8,000 LEBs. Fuel used, 40 gallons. Tuesday, truck 404. Weight, 8,000 LEBs. Fuel used, 42 gallons. Wednesday, truck 404. Weight, 8,000 LEBs. Fuel used, 55 gallons. She frowned. She pulled another sheet. Driver logs. Who drives truck 404? She asked. Roman checked a list. A man named Kalen. He's been with us for 10 years. Trusted. He's stopping, Louisa said. His logs show a direct route. No stops. Physics doesn't lie, Louisa said, her voice gaining confidence. She pointed to the fuel consumption column. Look at the delta here. On Wednesdays and Fridays, his truck burns 15% more fuel for the exact same distance and cargo weight. That means either the truck is significantly heavier on those days, which the manifest denies, or the engine is idling for approximately 45 minutes somewhere along the route. She traced the route on the map. Here, between the dock and the highway, there's a blind spot in the GPS tracking near the old textile district. He's stopping there, idling. Roman stared at the map. His face was unreadable. And look here, Louisa continued, caught up in the puzzle. The suspension maintenance logs. Truck 404 replaces rear shocks twice as often as the rest of the fleet. He's overloading the truck on the return trip. He's not stealing from you, Mr. Mercer. He's using your trucks to move something else for someone else while he's on your dime. Roman was silent for a long time. He looked at the fuel logs, then at the maintenance records. It was a correlation that no algorithm had flagged because the data points were in separate departments. Maintenance didn't talk to accounting. Smuggling, Roman murmured. He's running a side hustle with my vehicles. That's the friction, Louisa said, stepping back. That's why your efficiency is down. Roman walked over to a phone on the wall. He picked it up and pressed a single button. Victor, bring me Kalen, tonight. He hung up. Louisa felt a cold knot form in her stomach. What will you do to him? Roman walked back to her. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was electric, startling her. You solve the puzzles, Louisa, he said softly. I handle the trash. That's the arrangement. I didn't mean to get him in trouble, she whispered. He got himself in trouble when he betrayed me, Roman said. You just turned on the light so I could see the rat. He turned and walked toward the door. Get some sleep. We have a lot of work to do tomorrow. I have a feeling Kalen isn't the only loose gear in this machine. Louisa stood alone in the massive library. She looked at the papers on the table. She had passed the test. She was safe. Toby was safe. But as she looked at the red circle she had drawn around the textile district on the map, she realized the golden cage had just clicked shut. She wasn't just an observer anymore. She was the eyes of the monster. And the monster was hungry. 3 weeks later, the transformation of Louisa was complete, at least on the surface. Gone were the fraying sneakers and the oversized hoodies that she used to hide in. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in her suite, Louisa stared at a stranger. The woman in the reflection wore a gown of emerald silk that clung to her frame like liquid envy. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, cascaded in polished waves over her shoulders. She wore diamonds around her neck that cost more than the entire apartment building she had grown up in. You look acceptable, Roman's voice came from the doorway. Louisa turned. Roman was wearing a tuxedo, looking every inch the prince of the city, but his eyes were tight. Tonight wasn't a date. It was a battlefield. Remind me why I'm doing this? Louisa asked, smoothing the silk nervously. I analyze logistics. I find shipping errors. I don't do cocktail parties. Because tonight isn't about shipping errors, Roman said, stepping into the room. He handed her a small, sleek clutch. It's about a merger. The Kovac organization is looking to partner with us on the waterfront development. Their leader, Oleg Kovac, is a human lie detector. He doesn't trust contracts. He trusts instinct. And you need me to... What? Charm him? No, Roman said, his gaze intense. I need you to watch him. Kovac has a nervous tic when he's bluffing. My intelligence says it's in his hands, but I've never seen it. I need you to find the friction in his pitch. If he's lying about his capital, and I sign that deal, I expose my entire network to federal scrutiny." He stepped closer, the scent of his cologne, musk and expensive tobacco, filling her senses. "You are my eyes, Louisa. Tonight you are not my employee. You are my fiancé." Louisa's breath hitched. "Your what?" "It's a necessary cover. It explains why you're at the table and why I value your opinion. Just play the part." He offered his arm. "Shall we, darling?" The venue was the Starlight Roof, a private club atop the city's tallest skyscraper. The room was filled with the city's elite, politicians, tech moguls, and the wolves of the underworld who pulled their strings. They sat at a private table near the balcony. Opposite them sat Oleg Kovac, a bear of a man with a thick grey beard and eyes like ice chips. Beside him was his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Tate. The dinner was a tense affair of 5 courses and veiled threats. Roman and Kovac spoke in low, pleasant tones about synergy and mutual growth, but the subtext was war. Louisa sat silently, sipping sparkling water. She played the role of the trophy wife perfectly, smiling at the right moments, laughing softly at Kovac's boisterous jokes. But her mind was racing. She was dissecting Kovac. She watched his hands. He gestured broadly. No tremors. No tapping. She watched his eyes. Steady contact. She listened to the rhythm of his speech. Consistent. "The capital is fully liquid," Kovac was saying, cutting into his steak. "We have 300 million sitting in the Cayman accounts, ready for transfer the moment we sign. No regulators, no delays." Roman nodded, seemingly satisfied. "That sounds promising, Oleg." Louisa felt a nudge in her mind, a dissonance. It wasn't Kovac. She shifted her gaze to the lawyer, Mr. Tate. Every time Kovac mentioned the money, Tate didn't move. He didn't blink. He was too still. It was unnatural, a forced suppression of kinetic energy. Then she saw it. Kovac reached for his wine. As he did, his cufflink clicked against the table. Clink. Tate immediately took a sip of water. 10 minutes later, Kovac mentioned the timeline of the merger. His cufflink hit the table again. Clink. Tate touched his tie. It was a code. Louisa leaned in close to Roman, resting her hand intimately on his forearm. To the room, it looked like a lover's whisper. "It's not Kovac," she breathed into Roman's ear. "It's the lawyer. Kovac is the puppet. Tate is pulling the strings." Roman didn't react, keeping his smile fixed on Kovac. "Explain." "The cufflink," she whispered. "Kovac is signaling Tate every time he makes a promise. Tate signals back. Water for yes. Tie for no. Kovac just checked for approval on the timeline, and Tate touched his tie. They can't meet the deadline, Roman. They're stalling. They don't have the money yet. They're using your reputation to secure a loan from the Chinese banks." Roman's eyes hardened, though his smile remained. He covered Louisa's hand with his own, squeezing it gently. "Brilliant," he murmured. Roman turned back to the table. He picked up his glass. "Oleg," Roman said, his voice dropping an octave. "I've reconsidered the timeline. I think we need the funds transferred into escrow tonight. Before dessert." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Kovac froze. He looked instinctively at Tate. Tate's hand twitched toward his tie, but he stopped himself. "Tonight?" Kovac laughed nervously. "Roman, banking hours." "The Caymans don't have banking hours," Roman said coldly. "And neither do we." He leaned back. "Unless, of course, the money isn't there. Unless you're trying to leverage my name to get a loan you haven't secured yet." Kovac turned pale. Tate slammed his napkin down. This is an insult. We are leaving." "Sit down," Roman commanded. The authority in his voice was like a whip crack. "You aren't leaving until I say we're done." The negotiations that followed were brutal. With their bluff called, Kovac and Tate folded. Roman renegotiated the deal, taking a 60% controlling stake instead of the proposed 40%, and demanding collateral that stripped Kovac of his best assets. By the time they left the Starlight roof, Roman had effectively swallowed a rival empire without firing a shot. In the limousine ride home, the adrenaline was high. Roman poured 2 glasses of champagne. "To the best investment I ever made," he said, clinking his glass against hers. Louisa took a sip, her cheeks flushed. She felt powerful. She wasn't just observing the machine anymore. She was driving it. "You were terrifying in there," Louisa said. "And you were magnificent," Roman replied. He looked at her, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. The tension between them shifted. It wasn't about business anymore. He reached out and touched her cheek. Louisa stopped breathing. She knew she shouldn't. He was her boss. He was a criminal. He was dangerous. But he was also the only person who had ever seen her, truly seen her, as something other than broken. "Louisa," he whispered. He leaned in. She closed her eyes, tilting her head up. Their lips were inches apart when the partition window rolled down with a buzz. "Boss," Victor's voice broke the spell. "We have a situation at the estate." Roman pulled back instantly, the mask of the Don sliding back into place. "What is it?" "The medical wing," Victor said grimly. The alarms were tripped. Louisa's heart stopped. "Toby." The drive back to the estate was a suffocating silence. Louisa gripped the leather armrest until her knuckles turned white, while Roman barked orders into his phone in rapid-fire Russian. His face, usually a mask of cool calculation, was twisted in fury. When they burst into the medical wing, the smell of disaster hit them instantly, antiseptic mixed with violence. Security guards swarmed the hallway, and the nurse was weeping in the corner. Louisa pushed past Victor and sprinted into the room. The bed was empty. The monitors were smashed, glass crunching under her heels. The IV drip had been torn from its stand, pooling clear fluid on the floor. A single sheet of paper was pinned to the pillow with a switchblade. Louisa's knees gave out. She collapsed, a scream tearing from her throat. "Toby!" Roman entered a second later. He surveyed the wreckage, his eyes landing on the knife. He pulled it free and unfolded the paper. His jaw tightened until a muscle feathered in his cheek. He handed it to Louisa without a word. The note was typed. No handwriting to analyze, no friction to find. The ledger for the boy. Midnight, the old foundry. Come alone. If Mercer comes, the boy dies. Louisa stared at the words, the room spinning. They wanted the black ledger she had retrieved from the Gordian sphere, the book that held the keys to Roman's entire empire. "They have him," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. She looked up at Roman, desperate hope in her eyes. "We have to give them the book." "No," Roman said immediately. His voice was calm, but it was the terrifying calm of a nuclear reactor before meltdown. "Victor, lock down the city. Check the cameras." "The cameras were looped," Victor reported, looking ashamed. It was an inside job. Louisa stood up, her grief hardening into something sharp and cold. "I am going to the foundry. I am giving them the book." "That ledger contains the names of every judge, politician, and cleaner on my payroll," Roman said, stepping between her and the door. "If that gets out, it's not just my money, Louisa. It's death for hundreds of people, including us." "It's my brother," Louisa screamed, shoving Roman's chest with both hands. "I don't care about your payroll. I don't care about your empire. He needs his medicine. He'll die in 24 hours without it. Roman caught her wrists, holding her fast. Louisa, listen to me. You are not going to the foundry. It's a trap. They will kill you and the boy the moment they have the book. You don't know that. I do know that. Because that is what I would do, Roman shouted back. The honesty of it hung in the air like smoke. He released her, stepping back. I will handle this. My men will find him. But the ledger stays in the vault. You're choosing your money over his life, Louisa said, her voice trembling with betrayal. After the dinner, the champagne, the almost kiss in the car, she had foolishly thought she mattered to him. She thought she was a partner. But she was just an asset, and the ledger was a more valuable asset. I am choosing survival, Roman said coldly. Victor, escort Louisa to her room. Put a guard on the door. She does not leave. Roman, please. Take her. Louisa was dragged away, kicking and screaming. She was thrown into her luxurious suite, and the heavy door was locked from the outside. She pounded on the wood until her fists bruised. Then, silence. She looked at the digital clock on the bedside table. 10:45 p.m. The foundry was 40 minutes away. She wiped her face. Roman had made a mistake. He had treated her like a hysterical woman. He had forgotten who she was. He had forgotten that she was the one who solved the unsolvable. She needed to get out. She needed the ledger. The room was a fortress. No windows she could open. A guarded door. But every machine has friction. Every system has a flaw. Her eyes landed on the smart home panel on the wall. It controlled the room's temperature and lighting, wired directly into the house's main grid. Louisa ran to the bathroom and grabbed the hairdryer. She ripped the cord out with her teeth, exposing the copper wires. I'm sorry, Roman, she whispered. She unscrewed the faceplate of the smart panel, using the metal clasp of her earring, exposing the delicate circuitry. She knew the house schematic from her work on the shipping logistics. The security system and the environmental controls shared a common ground loop, a design flaw. If she created a short circuit here, the system was designed to fail safe, meaning the electronic locks would disengage to prevent trapping people during a fire. She wrapped the copper wire around her fingers. She jammed the live wires into the circuit board. Crack! A spark of blue electricity exploded. Louisa was thrown backward, her arm numb, the smell of ozone filling the air. The lights in the room died. Then, a distinct click echoed from the door. Louisa scrambled to her feet. She opened the door a crack. The hallway was dark, emergency lights flickering. The guard was down the hall, shouting into his radio, distracted by the sudden blackout. She slipped out, ghosting through the darkened house toward Roman's study. The electronic keypad on the main vault was dead, but Roman had installed a manual override, a mechanical tumbler. Louisa fell to her knees in front of the wall safe. She didn't need light. She had the touch. Left, right. Click, click. The safe swung open. There it was, the black ledger. She grabbed it, clutching it to her chest. Going somewhere? The voice came from the shadows behind her. Louisa spun around. Roman was standing there, a silhouette against the moonlight. He was holding a gun, pointed directly at her heart. I told you, Roman said, his voice devoid of emotion. The ledger stays. And I told you, Louisa said, backing toward the balcony door, that I'm saving my brother. You think you can trade that book and walk away? Roman asked, stepping closer. They will kill you both. I have a plan, she lied. She didn't have a plan. She just had desperation. Louisa! Roman's finger tightened on the trigger. She didn't wait. She turned and smashed the glass of the balcony door with a heavy bronze statue. She stepped out into the cold night air. They were on the second floor, A trellis of ivy ran down the side. "Louisa!" Roman shouted, lowering the gun and rushing forward. She didn't look back. She vaulted over the railing, grabbing the ivy. She slid down, tearing her palms, landing hard in the garden mulch. She scrambled up and ran toward the service gate, the ledger tucked inside her silk dress. She had betrayed the man she was falling in love with. She had stolen the keys to the kingdom. As she vanished into the night, Roman stood on the balcony. He gripped the railing, looking at the darkness where she had disappeared. "Victor!" he roared into his headset. "Get the car and bring the heavy artillery." He hadn't shot her, which meant he had made his choice. He was going to war. The old foundry was a skeletal ruin of rust and iron. Louisa stepped into the cavernous hall, her emerald gown torn and feet bleeding, clutching the black ledger against her chest. "I'm here!" she screamed. "I have the book!" A floodlight snapped on high above. On a rusted catwalk suspended 40 feet in the air, Mr. Tate stood holding a pistol to the back of a kneeling figure's head. "Toby." "Punctuality is a virtue," Tate called down smoothly. "Toss the book to the guard on your left." Louisa hesitated, eyeing the 3 mercenaries on the ground floor. "Let him go first. You're in no position to negotiate," Tate sneered, shoving Toby toward the railing. "The book, or the boy flies." Louisa threw the ledger. The guard caught it, flipped it open, and nodded to Tate. "It's real." "Excellent," Tate smiled cruelly. "Kill them both." The guards raised their rifles. Toby screamed, but before a trigger could be pulled, a red mist erupted from the lead guard's chest. From the shadows of the upper ventilation shafts, Victor dropped onto the catwalk behind Tate. Simultaneously, the heavy steel doors blew inward. Roman Mercer strode through the smoke, dual submachine guns blazing with terrifying precision. "Get down!" Roman roared. Louisa dove behind a massive smelting pot as bullets sparked against the metal. Roman's men poured in, turning the foundry into a chaotic kill zone. On the catwalk, Tate panicked. He grabbed Toby by the collar, dragging him over the railing. Toby dangled precariously in empty air, Tate's hand the only thing stopping a fatal drop. "Back off or he dies!" Tate shrieked. Roman froze. The gunfire ceased instantly. "Drop your weapons!" Tate yelled, sweat dripping down his face. "I want a helicopter or I let go." Roman lowered his guns, his eyes locking with Louisa's across the floor. He couldn't take the shot without risking Toby. Louisa looked up. She didn't see fear. She saw physics. Tate was leaning heavily on the rusted railing, which was bolted to the main support beam. Just above his head hung the massive iron counterweight for the old crane, suspended by a corroded friction brake. A pneumatic line ran from that brake down the wall to a pressure release valve just 10 feet from Louisa. It was a puzzle of kinetic energy. If the weight dropped, it would hit the far end of the beam, creating a violent fulcrum effect. She caught Roman's eye and tapped her temple, pointing subtly to the valve. Roman understood instantly. "Tate!" Roman shouted, stepping forward to draw focus. "You win! Pull him up!" Louisa bolted. She sprinted to the wall, grabbing a discarded wrench. "Stop her!" Tate screamed, raising his gun. Roman spun and dropped the last remaining guard with a single shot. Louisa jammed the wrench into the rusted valve and threw her entire body weight against it. Screech! The valve turned. A hiss of high-pressure steam exploded. High above, the brake failed. The 2-ton iron counterweight plummeted, slamming into the far end of the catwalk beam. The impact acted like a seesaw. The beam violently tipped upward on Tate's side. The sudden jerk broke Tate's grip. He fell backward, screaming as he plunged into the dark drainage pit below. But the tilting catwalk swung toward the lower platform. Toby tumbled onto the metal landing, rolling to safety. Silence returned to the foundry. Louisa scrambled up the stairs and pulled her shaking brother into her arms. "I've got you," she sobbed. A shadow fell over them. Roman stood there, covered in soot, the reclaimed ledger in his hand. Louisa flinched, hugging Toby tighter. "I stole it," she whispered. "I betrayed you." Roman crouched down. He looked at the ledger, then at the valve Louisa had turned. "You identified a failure point," he said softly. "You improvised a solution under pressure, and you used the environment to neutralize the target." He reached out, his hand gently touching her bruised cheek. "You didn't betray me, Louisa. You protected your asset. That's what family does." Louisa stared at him. "Family?" Roman stood and offered her his hand. "The Kovac organization will crumble after this. I need my best strategist to help me pick up the pieces. Waitress doesn't fit anymore. I was thinking partner." Louisa looked at the man who terrified the city, then at her brother. Safe because of the machine she had set in motion. The friction was finally gone. Everything was in sync. She took his hand. "Partner sounds good." And that is how Louisa went from wiping tables to ruling the underworld alongside the most dangerous man in the city. She proved that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun or a fist. It's a mind that can see the patterns others miss. Roman Mercer thought he hired a cleaning lady, but he ended up with a queen. What did you think of Louisa's quick thinking with the steam valve? If you loved that twist ending, hit the like button right now. It really helps the channel. And if you want to see more stories about underdogs outsmarting the elite, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I have a brand new story coming next week about a homeless man who accidentally buys a haunted mansion. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.